Hello, dear viewers, you are on the channel Life Cucumber Brick. Good mood to you, and enjoy listening. Clayton looked around. Almost nothing had changed in the last 7 years he hadn't been in this city. Still the same bleakness, still the same grayness. A few new signs, though maybe there had been some before. He just hadn't noticed them. Coming from this town was Wendy, his Wendy, whom he loved so much that he couldn't forgive and forget in 7 empty years. Clayton got a room at a local hotel and then decided he needed to go get something to eat. He would go to the cemetery tomorrow. Tomorrow, 7 years since Wendy died, and he came here for the first time. He went outside, decided he would walk. He and Wendy used to walk here all the time. After a few minutes, he saw the same park where the memories began, and Clayton turned there. He was only 28 when his father sent him to this town to inspect their firm's operations. He found a problem that day, called his father, listened to his father's praise, and contentedly decided to take a break. He had no acquaintances here. It was kind of early to the bar, so he headed for the park. There was a girl sitting by the pond, sobbing. Clayton was confused. He didn't know what to do, walk by or try to help. "I'm sorry, is something wrong? Maybe you need help." The girl flinched, turned to him and said, "Can you please go away? It's sickening without you." Clayton was taken aback, then angry. Clayton was taken aback, and then he got angry. Reveal without even trying to rectify the situation. Revite, and life will pass you by. The girl looked at him in amazement as Clayton spoke and didn't even cry. She sobbed and then cried even harder. "She's going by, and there's nothing you can do about it." Now Clayton certainly couldn't walk away. He sighed and sat down beside him. What could have happened to give birth like that? Did the guy quit? The girl froze, then looked at him. "Do you think that's something worth crying about?" Clayton smiled. "Fine, at least you're not silly. Did someone die on you?" She shook her head. "My aunt won't let me go to another town to study, you know. I graduated from the technical college, but I was invited to study further. And she said, 'That's enough. You know it's over. I'll spend the rest of my life in the local factory.' There's a problem. Wait a little while. You'll be a couple of years older. You'll save up for the road for the first time, and you'll go." The girl wiped her eyes. "How?" Without permission. Clayton knew he was advising the wrong thing, but he couldn't get away from those blue eyes. "Well, why not? It's not like anyone's forcing you to leave your aunt. You can visit her." The girl smiled. "I will." She stood up, but Clayton jumped right up. "My name is Clayton. It's Wendy. Wendy, could you come have some fun with me? I finished an important job today, and I'd like to take a break. I don't know anything in this town." The girl suddenly looked at him resentfully, and he guessed what she was thinking. Clayton laughed. "No, you've got me all wrong. You've got it all wrong. I really don't understand where one would go. What is there to breathe here at all?" She looked at him sternly. "Are you sure?" He answered quickly. "I swear." Now she laughed. "You looked like a schoolboy just now." And Clayton didn't say anything back. He was just admiring her as Wendy smiled. Anyway, even the sun didn't seem so bright then. Wendy agreed to walk him out. And Clayton realized more and more every minute he was around her. No girl like her had ever come his way before. He had to leave in a week. So he told Wendy, "Today we're going to meet your aunt, and tomorrow I'm taking you with me." I have to say, Wendy's aunt did seem mean. But the nice gifts from Clayton made her soften, and she kind of gave her blessing. She couldn't help but toss them afterwards. "When your rich boyfriend dumps you, you'll probably come crawling back to your aunt. Or can I sell your couch?" They didn't answer. They tried to hurry down the stairs. That last night, Wendy spent at his hotel before they left. It was their first night, and for Wendy, it was the first time at all, which almost made Clayton swoon. He had called his parents 150 times already, telling them he was returning with his fiancée. Told them what an extraordinary girl she was. Her mother did not share her excitement. Well, we'll see. Clayton never thought it would turn out like this. Mother hated Wendy from the moment she walked in. The girl looked frightened, battered. Eventually they left. Clayton got her a hotel room and came home. What was that about? Clayton, you're no fool yourself. That redneck can't be a member of our family. Mom, Dad, no matter what you say, I'm getting married. I love Wendy and I'm not 15, so I don't know what I'm doing. Then 2 weeks later, he was sent pictures of his Wendy in the arms of another man. Clayton thought his heart would stop. He ran to Wendy. She threw herself into his arms and he pushed her away and then punched her. Never in his life will he forget that look ever. It was like hitting a defenseless little puppy. He would probably get that look too. He popped out into the street, needed to calm down, and then come back and talk. He needed to get some sort of explanation. He threw the pictures on the floor in front of Wendy. He couldn't go back that day. He just got drunk in some bar. And then the next day, Wendy was gone. There was just a note. You believe someone without even asking me anything. But that's not even what's important now. What matters is that you're not what I thought you were. He didn't go looking for her. Decided someone like her wasn't worthy of him. He drank for a long time, went out, then he woke up a little. And after a while, his aunt called him and said, Wendy was buried. Let her death be on your conscience. And that was it. That was 7 years ago. He went to the cemetery, but he didn't visit his aunt. Thought he'd feel better after sitting on her grave, but he didn't. He didn't get married. He couldn't imagine having anyone by his side. Realized now that he was right. His mother had told him, before she died, that a good friend of hers had taken the pictures. And Clayton hadn't noticed anything. Probably because he didn't want to notice. That was only 6 months ago. That's when Clayton realized what he had done. He couldn't do it anymore. He decided he had to go. He needed to apologize to Wendy and maybe visit his aunt, find out what had happened after all. He remembered to look at his watch. He'd been sitting for over an hour. He needed to find a cafe or something. His stomach was in a state of revolution. A cafe was found not far away, and most importantly, with tables outside. Although the heat had gone down a little, it was still stuffy. He ordered meat, salads, a cup of coffee. As he dined, he thought again, but almost immediately he was brought out of his reverie by a child's voice. Uncle, aren't you going to finish that? A boy stood in front of his table, pointing at the bread. Clayton shook his head in the negative. The boy grabbed the bread and rushed to the pond in the park. Clayton watched with a smile as he quickly crushed the bread to the ducks. Strange, of course, that the boy was alone at that age. But who knows what kind of family he has. Dressed poorly, but not a beggar. Maybe we should ask him for help. Clayton was about to get up, but a sharp pain pierced his stomach. What the hell? He never thought he'd have to have an emergency appendectomy in a small-town hospital. But it couldn't be helped. He lay down for the 5 days he was supposed to, flunked in a hotel for another day, and on the 7th he decided he was going to do what he came to do, and tomorrow he could leave. Clayton bought a large bouquet of white roses. Wendy was very fond of them. Not the big ones, but so many small ones per bush. He left the car at the cemetery gate and walked down the path. He had only been here once, but he remembered perfectly where to go. Around the grave there was a simple bed of trees. On the grave there was an iron cross instead of a wooden one. and on it was a photograph. Clayton stopped. The last thing he wanted to do right now was to meet his Aunt Wendy. He took a closer look. No, it wasn't an adult, it was a child. Strange and even kind of creepy. Clayton took a step forward and realized he had seen this boy before. He was the one who had asked him about the leftovers of the bread. This is getting interesting. Wendy said she had no one but her aunt. Although the boy is about 6 or 7 years old, so there wasn't. Clayton understood nothing. He approached quietly and said softly, "Hello." The boy turned around, stood up. "Hello." "What are you doing here?" The boy shrugged his shoulders. "I'm cleaning up. The grass is growing. I've been watering the flowers." "I mean, what are you doing on this particular grave? If I'm not mistaken, you weren't even here when that woman died. Are you related to her?" Clayton waited tensely for an answer, and the boy suddenly smiled sadly. "Yes, I am related to her. She died so that I could be born. Baba Jane is quite ill. It's hard for her to come here. So I myself take care of the grave and my mother." Clayton sat down on the bench. His legs couldn't hold him. "Taking care of your mother's grave? But Wendy didn't have children." The kid looked at him with interest. "Did you know my mother? And you tell me about her?" Clayton waved his hand. "Wait, Wendy died 7 years ago. How old are you?" The boy looked at him strangely as if he were insane. "It was 7, too, a week ago." "Well, that goes without saying. I'm going to school this year." "I don't get it." Clayton was trying to do some calculations in his head. How much time had passed between when Wendy left and when she died? Who knows what he'd been drinking like crazy, but about a year or less. Definitely less. It didn't take her long to find a replacement for him. So I'm totally confused. Can we go to your aunt or grandmother's? You know her. Come on, she doesn't really like visitors. Clayton grinned to himself. He remembered that well. Strange that the boy was living with her. He'd sooner believe it was Cargo who'd put him in an orphanage. Jane had given up a lot since he'd seen her, but apparently it hasn't affected her memory in any way. "You? What are you doing here?" Clayton stepped resolutely into the apartment. "Toe talk. Didn't you have a deal? You drove the girl to her grave. Now you're here to send us to the same place." Clayton freaked out. "What are you talking about?" "In front of the kid, the way I drove Wendy to her grave. I didn't see her before she died for how long? Whatever. She had your baby with him, and she died with him." Clayton felt the floor beneath his feet become something unruly and wobbly, but something in his head popped and seemed to calm down. Here all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. And now Clayton realized he was not an idiot. He was a monster who would never be forgiven. Clayton sank slowly to the couch. How? It can't be. Maybe it can't, but there's no way I could live in peace. You're looking after Wendy half your life. You're bringing up Gareth. Do I need that? I've lived my whole life for others. Damn you all to hell. Clayton inexplicably asked, "Why didn't you call me? Who needs you like this? I'd rather die than come to you." Clayton listened to Jane while he looked at Gareth. The boy didn't take his eyes off him either. Then he whispered, "Why did you leave us? Mother would still be alive." Gareth jumped out of the room and rushed outside. Clayton followed him. He caught up with the kid as he ran out of the yard. "Gareth, stop. We need to talk. The other day it was my fault. We didn't talk to your mom. We didn't figure things out. And it all went bad. It all went bad. Let me tell you everything, just the way it happened. You're an adult now. Maybe you can understand." Gareth thought about it for a minute, and then he said, "Okay, but if you don't lie to me." "No, I'll tell it like it is." They sat down on the bench and Clayton began to talk. He tried to omit some details because Gareth was still young and generally very afraid that a boy of 7 wouldn't understand his story. But after Clayton had finished, Gareth said, "It turns out that no one is to blame and everyone is to blame. It turns out it is. But I want you to know, I never got over your mother." Gareth turned to him. "Will you go away?" Clayton smiled. "I'll go, but only with you, if you don't mind. And Baba Jane? We'll ask her to come with us. And if she doesn't want to, we'll buy her a nice house here and we'll come and visit." "Really, really, really?" "Then we'll go and tell her everything. She only looks so mean. But in fact, if I, for instance, am sick, she cries and sings me songs." Gareth held out his hand, and Clayton squeezed it tightly. If you like the story, please support me with the Police Up button. It's one click, but it means a lot to me. Thank you.